So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Having touched upon the hard topics in previous sessions, and now we would like to change gear and move on to session 5, Friendship and Reciprocity Chain, connecting leaders, ideas, and communities for a resilient Indo-Pacific. This session focuses on Taiwan's warm power, which builds partnerships and people-to-people exchanges, highlighting how shared values and mutual support strengthen our region. Our speakers will explore how building trust, fostering collaboration, and linking communities can create lasting resilience across the Indo-Pacific. Our moderator for this session is Ms. Sana Hashmi, postdoctoral fellow and coordinator for Taiwan-India Dialogue, TAEF Taiwan. Welcome. And our panelists, let's start with Ms. Gloria Jumamil Mercado, Chairperson and CEO of Asian Center for Excellence in Development and Security, Philippines. Masato Seko, Senior Director of the Nippon Foundation, Japan. Welcome. Yoshikazu Kato, Director of Trans-Pacific Group, Japan. Satu Limaye, Executive Director of East-West Center, the United States. And Caroline Freed, Director of Research of Center for Asia-Pacific Resilience and Innovation, Taiwan. And now I would like to give the floor to our moderator.
Thank you, Betty, and I am very excited to moderate this panel. We have talked about such serious issues. Now it's actually time to talk about the issue that matters the most to us, connection, people-to-people connect. But before I begin the session, Alan always says that we are not just a think tank, we are a do tank, and I think this think tank summit is one of the outcomes of what we have been preaching, so we have actually done this today. As think tanks, I don't think that, there's a thing that we keep talking, but I don't think that we actually talk enough. And we talk about engaging and cooperating with each other. So I think this platform is so important for this aspect, but we are discussing new southbound policy today. And when it was launched in 2016, it was actually a people-centric policy. And even today, it's a people-centric policy. Now we have an upgraded version of the policy, that new southbound policy. So we have been talking about security, democracy, non-China supply chain, but now we are talking about people. We are talking about the human component of the new southbound policy. And when it comes to new southbound policy, the biggest topic that we discuss is the migrant workers from Southeast Asia. And you're from the Philippines. So first I would turn to you and I'll ask you this question, that there are a number of Filipino migrant workers in Taiwan, and they're actually an integral part of the society. And if you ask anyone in Taiwan, I don't think that Taiwan could be seen actually without the Southeast Asian migrant workers, specifically Filipino. So my question to you is that how, from your perspective, do you see that this human and security development in Southeast Asia is being aligned with the new southbound policy? And if you have any suggestions how to improve it and how to improve the conditions of the migrant workers in Taiwan. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sana Hashmi. First of all, I just want to say that this inaugural gathering of think tanks under the auspices of TAEF demonstrate the power of ideas and relationship in shaping a shared Indo-Pacific future. For the Philippines, friendship with Taiwan is not only about geographic proximity. If you fly from the international airport of Kaohsiung to the closest international airport in the Philippines, it's just 30 minutes. That's Lawag, no? So from Kaohsiung, it's an hour, and from here, it's 2 hours. So it's anything that happens here would definitely affect also our country. So it's not only geographic proximity, but it's also about historic kinship and people-to-people ties. Our fishermen, traders, students, overseas Filipinos and families have long connected us across waters. Right now, there are 200,000 Filipinos in Taiwan, 160 are overseas Filipino, The rest are students, Filipinas married to Taiwanese, and some are economic workers. So the essence of reciprocity is alive in this everyday interaction. They build trust and resilience beyond formal agreements, since we don't have a diplomatic relations. And these people-centered ties mirror the intent of Taiwan's new Southbound Policy Plus, which values community and civil society partnership as much as state-to-state cooperation. The notion of reciprocity chain is especially meaningful in today's Indo-Pacific landscape. No country can address challenges alone, whether maritime security, economic uncertainty, or climate risk. What binds us not only strategic interest, but are also shared values of dignity, solidarity, and mutual respect. By linking Taiwan's southbound outreach with Japan's maritime initiatives, New Zealand's inclusivity, and America's Indo-Pacific strategies, we are forming a network that is resilient, a soft power chain built on trust, not on tension. These connections, when sustained by genuine goodwill, becomes the moral infrastructure of free, open, and humane region. Recent studies in international relations remind us that group emotions like trust, empathy, and solidarity are as crucial as treaties or trade. When nations genuinely feel a sense of reciprocity, they become more willing to share burdens, to listen, and to extend a hand in times of crisis. I just want to say that every time there's a crisis in the Philippines, Taiwan is one of the first countries that comes to our rescue. This is where Taiwan's soft powers truly shine. Its credibility, compassion, and competence have made it a trusted development partner in Asia. Friendship, therefore, is not sentimental. It is actually strategic. It generates emotional legitimacy that sustains both security and development. As a frontline state in the South China Sea and an active member of ASEAN, the Philippines sees reciprocity as a guiding principle. We embrace partnership like EDGA, multilateral dialogue, and track to diplomacy, not to divide, but to build trust and trust chains that connect rather than fragment the region. Our vision is simple yet profound: resilience for our people and relevance in the Indo-Pacific order. It is in this spirit that I turn to Taiwan's new Southbound Policy Plus under President Lai. This initiative exemplifies how friendship and reciprocity are translated into concrete regional cooperation in education, health, digital transformation, and sustainable development. From our perspective, this policy has moved beyond its original framework. It has matured into a platform not only advances in Taiwan's partnership, but also strengthens the larger Indo-Pacific architecture. Through NSP Plus, Taiwan projects soft power, not by persuasion, but by participation, through shared growth, humanitarian collaboration, and the co-creation of solutions. So may I recommend to make the new Southbound Policy Plus more influential and aligned with Indo-Pacific priorities. Number one is to broaden the people-centered dimension by expanding scholarships, technical training, and cross-cultural programs that build future-ready youth across ASEAN. These are Taiwan's strongest instrument of soft power, chains of reciprocity that endure beyond politics. Aligned with regional resilience priorities by focusing on climate adaptation, food security, and also innovation and ecosystem that can serve as anchor for sustainable development and partnership in the Indo-Pacific. And lastly is institutionalized track 2 and think tank cooperation, establishing permanent platforms linking academia, civil society, and policy network. These will ensure emotional legitimacy and continuing even amidst political shifts. Thank you.
And I feel that your introduction was very insightful. I think we in Taiwan really need to hear about what the new southbound policy countries are actually thinking and viewing new southbound policy as. And I do agree with a lot of your views about how the people-centric dimension of the policy needs to be furthered. And I have also been writing in my article that there needs to be new southbound policy-centric scholarship and fellowship for the students and scholars in the country. And I think Taiwan is doing it. Taiwan is focusing on the scholars and students from the region. And I could give you an example of India, actually. There are just 2,500 Indian students in Taiwan right now. But the target is to get 10,000 students. So Taiwan is absolutely focusing on that. But of course, the gaps in actions and result outcomes are totally different. And today we signed an MOU with your think tank, so I feel this is one of the first steps towards institutionalizing partnership with at least think tanks in the Philippines and Southeast Asian countries. So now let me move to Masato-san. You are from Japan, and in Taiwan, Japan is one of the most reliable partners, very friendly countries. If you ask any Taiwanese, the first thing they would say that, we love Japan. I went to Japan 2 months ago. Next to my table, wherever I was going, there were Taiwanese. So we actually bonded over Taiwan, my Taiwanese friends. So, Japan is one country that is being seen as, apart from the US, that if something happens, there is a Taiwan contingency, Japan will come to Taiwan's rescue. But we have, in Taiwan, talked about Japan within the Indo-Pacific framework, within the general Taiwan, US, Japan perspective. But then, since you work for a very prominent organization in Japan, so how do you view Taiwan's new southbound policy as a part of fostering resilience and regional cooperation?
Right, thank you very much. I first would like to thank TAF for inviting me to this significant conference. It's an honor and I'm privileged to be here. I would like to begin by briefly sharing where I come from. That would give you the context of how my perspectives and where my view comes from. So I spent most of my career in the field from the work of identifying the current social challenges and needs, designing intervention, mobilizing resources, and implementing the actual programs and projects as a program implemented and funded by the organization that I belong. So it is more of a thinking functions as well as a implementation. And that makes us slightly different perspective from other participants or panelists or speakers that comes from the academic background. So responding to the question, looking at this regional framework of cooperation, including this NSP plus, and also quite similar with Indo-Pacific, the strategy on Indo-Pacific and concept. And I'm quite thankful to see this pamphlet been distributed to us, sophisticating the whole concept into a more concrete categorization. Like I can see 7 different partnerships and the components that's been laid out in this pamphlet. And also, I see the 4 different chains that's been also been articulated very well in this pamphlet. But how I see is in this framework is more simple, where I see 2 layers in the strategies. The first layer, or first tier, is focused on cooperation essential for survival. So of the area that we may call as a hard security area. So this includes defense partnership, deterrence posture, political supply chain protection. The previous session was exactly on that particular topic. But cooperation in this tier or on this layer tend to be exclusive. It is typically limited to the country that share core political values and also a strategic interest. And in today's Indo-Pacific, I will say that maybe the partner, from the Taiwan's perspective, I would say that the partner be of course, primarily United States, Japan, maybe, Australia, and selected ASEAN states, ASEAN countries. So that is the first layer that I see in this strategy. The second layer is something that is a little bit more relevant to the work that I do, which is more on non-traditional security domains, such as disaster resilience, pandemic response, cyber hygiene, or other peace mediation support, those soft area, non-traditional security areas that I see in this strategy. Here, functional cooperation is possible even among the states that do not share the same political views or political value system. So in this sense, the first tier is very much exclusive. You have to have the similar or same value system to be shared to have a cooperation. But for the second tier, which is more of a functional cooperation, the cooperation can be done with other partners, not necessarily sharing common value systems. So I can give you one example. A very typical of it is like what happened in COVID from 2020 on. You can cooperate with China, even though you don't have a shared value system. And the cooperation is possible and necessary. So on those areas, we can see the wider partnership that is possible for the country like Taiwan to extend the possible way to spread this way of cooperation. So that is something that Japan can also offer on those areas that I just mentioned, on disaster resilience, peace mediation support, and other areas. So those are the areas that the Japan, can be able to support, but as the level and as the layer of the support area, I would like to say that there's two distinctly different layer of support area. And the second area, which is more on a non-traditional security domain, is the area that you can widen partnership amongst the countries that you don't necessarily share the common value system.
You talked about cooperation not on the basis of shared value, maybe perhaps specifically when we talk about China and Japan. I'm coming from India, and our foreign policy is actually based on issue-based coalition, even though we are a democracy, and I feel that has been a success. And maybe somewhere when Taiwan is drafting its own policy, perhaps some issues could be borrowed from Japanese Indo-Pacific policy, but I do believe that India also has to offer a lot when it comes to Indo-Pacific strategy, because India was actually the first country that actually focused on ASEAN as the core of its Indo-Pacific policy. And if in Taiwan we are trying to make the NSP plus as the core of the Indo-Pacific policy, that means we also have to take care of what the ASEAN countries' sensitivities, interests are. And I also believe that non-traditional security threats should be something that should be at the core center of the Taiwan's Indo-Pacific policy. But I feel that Taiwan is a little late to the game, but I feel it's never too late when it comes to Indo-Pacific. Taiwan had to be cautious. So with that, I would move to Kato-san. And I feel that we have already been given an overview of how Japan would see Taiwan's Indo-Pacific policy. But from your perspective, what could be the opportunities and challenges if we have to align Taiwan's new southward policy plus in the Indo-Pacific policy with Japanese free and Indo-Pacific policy?
Thank you, Sana, and thanks again for TIEF for inviting me, and it's a great honor to be here and deepen our partnership and promoting our discussion. This is a very important time, and a platform to, deepen and our understanding and to face this very complicated geopolitical era. And actually, Seko-san already pointed out how Japan sees, this kind of, issues and Taiwan, Indo-Pacific, and what Japan can offer. And beyond that, let me do some initial remarks. And first of all, I think Japan, Taiwan, we have long-time friendship and mutual trust and constant exchanges. And these are very important foundation to share values, face challenges, and enhance collaboration. I think this is a very important and basic point, and what Japan and Taiwan can do. And it should be based on open and inclusive regionalism. So regionalism matters in terms of deepen Taiwan and Japan's collaborations, and this is very important. This is the first point. And secondly, I am very glad to witness, TAEF. It's a great work. Actually, Seko-san already mentioned this pamphlet, and actually I have learned a lot. And your category and your framework very well framed and organized. These 4 chains, actually Professor Yang already introduced chain, in terms of chain. This is a kind of chain. And security, resilience, democratic value, non-red supply chain, and friendship and reciprocity. I think this is very carefully elaborated because we are facing complicated and risky challenges in terms of geopolitics, including uncertain rise of China and expansionism, and maybe value or identity competition. A lot of elements are happening simultaneously here in Indo-Pacific. So this is very important, and I have learned a lot. And actually, we, Japan, Taiwan, can share something on that. But I can see some Taiwanese characteristics from this pamphlet. For example, global peace. Of course, global peace matters for Taiwan, and societal democratic resilience and national unity. Or semiconductor. Of course, TSMC. It is very important for Taiwan's future, and inclusive growth. These are, I think, in my perspective, it's reflecting some Taiwanese, perspective or characteristics. So this is very important. And as ladies and gentlemen, in terms of Indo-Pacific policy, we know FOIP, free and open Indo-Pacific. This is somehow, initiated by Japanese former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, and now, Taiwan is launching its own Indo-Pacific strategy. So for Taiwan and Japan, this is something new starting point to deepen collaboration. So that's great. And in this sense, I think think tanks should play a key and critical role to share, face, and enhance. 3 keywords: sharing values, facing challenges, and enhance collaboration. So that's very important, and based on open regionalism. And finally, let me propose some question, or maybe it should be discussed widely, and I think it should be discussed in this think tank platform. As a Japanese, there are 3 concepts which can describe where we are. I mean, in geopolitics. One is Asia-Pacific. Asia-Pacific. Second, Trans-Pacific. I'm from Trans-Pacific group. Trans-Pacific. Third, Indo-Pacific. Which one is correct? These are similar but different, right? Asia-Pacific means purely geographic word, maybe out of date, but it is real. Asia-Pacific, it is correct. We are, both Taiwan and Japan are located in Asia-Pacific region. It's correct, right? Second, Trans-Pacific. We have Trans-Pacific Partnership, now CPTPP, right? Comprehensive, Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership. This was initiated and done. Of course, a lot of partners, but initiated by U.S. and Japan. But unfortunately, U.S. under the Trump first administration, they withdrew from the TPP, and then now CPTPP. And this is Trans-Pacific, right? And we say rule-based order, free and open and inclusive, and maybe highest standard regional free trade mechanism. This is maybe the CPTPP. And third one is Indo-Pacific. Indo-Pacific sounds more geopolitical, more like major power competition. And now we have IPEF, right? Indo-Pacific Economic Partnership for Prosperity. And after U.S. withdrew, the United States withdrew from CPTPP, U.S. created IPEF, and Japan is part of that. So I think what I want to say is, how do we understand these similarity and differences? You know, Taiwan now is launching its own Indo-Pacific strategy, but at the same time, Taiwan is applying for Trans-Pacific CPTPP based on Trans-Pacific concept. So again, and for you now, new southbound policy plus, it requires us imagination plus. And then what's the relationship between NSP plus and Indo-Pacific strategy for Taiwan and this region? So this is very much open question. But I think these questions should be discussed in think tank diplomacy or 1.5 diplomacy. And particularly for Taiwan, I think a think tank is very important and much more important than other countries. Because again, in Japan and Taiwan, we do not have diplomatic relationship. In this situation, we need to take advantage of think tank, 1.5 or 2.0. It is not that important, but in my perspective, maybe 1.5 would be more sounding. But I think, again, think tanks should play a very important and unique role for Taiwan and Taiwan partners. So that's very important, and let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and you have raised such important points, specifically about think tank diplomacy and think tank engagements. I think we have been doing that very well in Taiwan, specifically in the past couple of years, specifically after President Tsai Ing-wen administration. And of course, I have given you examples of think tank diplomacy with India, but I also want to give you an example of the Philippines. Recently, we had this conference by Ocean Affairs Council. That's an annual conference, and now there has been a relaxation from the Philippine side that officials could actually visit Taiwan. And we actually had officials, high-level military officials attending the conference, including the spokesperson for the West Philippine Sea. So I think things are changing. There are transformative developments, but of course it would take time. But also your questions about the terminology, Asia-Pacific, Trans-Pacific, Indo-Pacific, a rules-based order versus a rules-based order versus the rules-based order. As in, I feel the answer depends on who you are talking to. If you're talking to India, Southeast Asia, they'd be like, we want a rules-based order. We don't want to follow rules-based order that is being preached by the West. As in, I feel that we need at least 2 days to discuss one terminology. But of course, we could ask the audience about that later. But let me move to my colleague from the US. So, Sato, I was in Warsaw last week, and I was a part of the Warsaw Security Forum and the New Security Leadership, which was organized by Josh. I asked a lot of my American colleagues that how does the US foreign policy look like, specifically in the Indo-Pacific? We in Asia are very worried about Trump administration. Is Trump administration going to come to Taiwan's rescue? What is its policy? And we are kind of concerned about the lack of presence of the US. Where is the Indo-Pacific? I don't really see a lot of Indo-Pacific in the US statement. So the answer that I got from a lot of my American friends were that you have to separate noise from action. The US is not going anywhere. America will be there for Taiwan. So there was this positivity, which we don't really see in this part of the world. So maybe you could share your perspective on that. And another question that I want to point to you, because we are discussing the new southbound policy, and at least in Trump 1.0, under Biden administration, there was this focus on Taiwan's engagement with India, and US was absolutely promoting, encouraging Taiwan to engage more with the regional countries, specifically with the Philippines, with India, and also the quadrilateral dialogue was there. So Taiwan was very optimistic about the prospects of the dialogue. So how do you see the US would expect Taiwan to have this security, non-security, or this friendship component within the Indo-Pacific policy?
Well, thank you, Sana, for the questions. Thank you for my fellow panelists. And of course, thank you, Chairman Zhao and TAEF for the invitation. There's a lot of questions there, so let me try to address as best I can some of them. But I do want to make 2 upfront notations so you understand the context where I'm coming from. First of all, I can't answer on behalf of the Trump administration or the US government, certainly, because I represent an organization called the East-West Center, which is appropriated and authorized by the United States Congress through the State Department Foreign Operations, and our contract is held at the State Department. It's not our only funder, but it is our prime source of legitimacy to do the actions. And I want to be very clear about what we do in this space, because it's very relevant not only to the theme of this think tank gathering, but to the theme of this particular session. And that is, our congressional charter says that we are to help build better U.S.-Asia relations by bringing Americans and Asians together to do collaborative study, research, and exchange. So, Sana, you mentioned a think tank. We've talked a lot about think tanks. You said a do tank. I like to describe the East-West Center as a people tank. We do things and we think, but we do them because we bring Asians and Americans together. And that, I think, is the heart of our comparative advantage. We do not represent the U.S. government. We do not speak on behalf of the U.S. government, but we can use our convening power and our presence to. The second point I want to make is that I've had a long-standing association with the chairman and with TAEF, and I was thinking a lot about this and reread the reports that we did earlier, including a 2022 report that I contributed to called, and I note, Assessing Trends and Demand Signals for Taiwan's New Southbound Policy and Building a U.S.-Taiwan Coordination Mechanism. We did this with the Global Taiwan Institute and TAEF, and I was very pleased to be part of that. I wanted to make those two foreground comments because it leads to some of my assessments. First, there is no doubt that there is unpredictability, uncertainty, and a considerable amount of exasperation, maybe irritation, maybe annoyance with U.S. policy. I think we, as a non-government person, we can be honest and say that, you know, I hear this throughout the region. I've just spent 3 weeks in the region, in Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam, and now here. So I've been picking up this sense of them. Having said that, I very much agree with whatever you heard in Warsaw, which is notwithstanding the tumult and the unpredictable uncertainty, I would just remind this room, and if you don't have a chance, you can go online and look at asiamattersforamerica.org, America Matters for Asia, America Matters for Asia, Asia Matters for America. And it will show you in very concrete empirical terms just how vested U.S. interests are in this region. And no short-term policies can take away or withdraw those fundamentals. Just to cite a few examples, right? 30% of U.S. foreign students come from this region, generating billions of dollars. 40% of U.S. trade now comes from this region. The top 3 investors in the United States over the last decade come from this region: Japan, Korea. Of course, Taiwan is very big. And there are different reports for Taiwan, there are different reports for Japan, for Korea, for ASEAN. You go to ASEAN, it's just extraordinary. We're the largest investor in Southeast Asia. So these things aren't going to be removed. That's just the economic and social, students, and other dimensions. But just think about the security relationships. We have 5 treaty allies in this region. We have almost 80,000 troops in this region. We have a military defense security presence here in this region. Notwithstanding, and I quite grant you that, you know, things have been a little bit rough with the U.S.-India relationship and other relationships recently. But you have to remember, I worked for the U.S. government at that time as a civilian and for the Navy at a time when we couldn't talk to India, at a time when we literally could not speak to India about cooperative activities. So from my perspective, we've come a very long way. It's not perfection. It's not problem-free. So I want to just suggest that notwithstanding that we don't have grand strategies, and your guess is as good as mine about what 2 key documents will show. The National Defense Strategy, which is due out fairly soon, and the press, if the press is to be believed, or if the press is accurately reporting what is being leaked, this NDS will be quite different. It will be very homeland security specific. It'll be hemispheric specific. It'll prioritize China. And the other is will or won't there be an Indo-Pacific strategy? So on that, I want to make a case. And watching Taiwan's new southbound policy over the years, as I said, I've been involved with it for some time, comparing President Lai's speech at the Yushan Forum just recently in June, I believe it was. All Indo-Pacific strategies are not fixed. They're dynamic. Ours have been slightly dynamic. Even Japan's have been slightly dynamic. I would remind you that the initial Japanese free and open Indo-Pacific policy from Prime Minister Abe was called a strategy, and then it was sort of brought down to a vision because the dynamic changed. So I don't want us to get into a fixed Indo-Pacific strategy. Does it meet this and this criteria? A strategy is only useful if it delivers the outcomes that meet national security interests. And national security interests change because conditions change. Relationships alter. Opportunities come forth. And so what I'm more concerned about is how we align on key fundamentals. And here I want to state a couple things. I know I have just a minute. First, I want to state that whether or not what the NDS says or the Indo-Pacific strategy says, the core elements between the US and Taiwan and between us and most of the region have not fundamentally changed. The tariffs are exceeding in their import, their public import, their substantive meaning. And you can just go do the math on how important exports to the US are as a share of GDP for every country. I've done it. I've done the math. They're quite small. They're quite small. In fact, I would argue if you compare those and compare them analytically with what the ADB and other elements suggest about what could be brought about by reform in East Asian countries, domestic economic reform, opening up of markets, et cetera, I think you'll see far greater payoffs for the Indo-Pacific region by domestic adjustments that make their economies even more relevant and attractive to the United States. It's not to suggest that I'm a promoter of the current tariff policy or anything of the kind. I'm simply trying to weight what matters most and what can be controlled. So I'll end by saying, of the four topics we've discussed today, resilient supply chains, defending against security authoritarianism, which we see in Russia and China and elsewhere, in terms of building people-to-people relationships, in terms of developing democracy, these elements are still very much alive in our policies. Someone mentioned earlier that Congress is going to support the National Endowment for Democracy. I do not know that, but it seems to me there's a lot of support in Congress for that. Despite not having an Indo-Pacific strategy, we are working very hard to de-risk, if not decouple, from China. Just because there's not a big strategy, we're systematically doing it in Department of Defense, in the political military field, in supply chain resilience, all kinds of areas. So I will just close by saying, it is a tumultuous period. It is an uncertain period. It may even be an irritating and annoying and unhappy period. But some bedrock elements of US policy that are aligned with the Indo-Pacific remain, and I take great comfort in knowing that as Taiwan, in President Lai's speech, adjusts its new southbound policy to the recent focuses that were made by President Lai here, and our attempt to keep our status, position, and interest in the Indo-Pacific, there's a lot of room for common work.
That does give us some comfort. And I think it's very important, as an Indian who's been living in Taiwan, we have security concerns in India, we have security concerns in Taiwan. We do need US security and military presence. I don't think there is any two-way about that. And as you have also rightly mentioned, I agree with you 100% that there is a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of unpredictability, but the constants have not really changed. We are seeing there are some problems between US, EU, transatlantic relationship. There are a lot of problems between India and US. but I don't think the fundamentals of the relations are going to change. And I also, even though I am a little bit concerned about Taiwan's situation, but I do not really see US retreating from the Taiwan situation or no assurance in a Taiwan contingency. So I think thank you so much for your assessment. I think we needed to hear that from we needed to really hear a US perspective. Caroline, to you, you have been living in Taiwan for a long time and you work for a think tank that focuses on resilience. It has resilience in Capri. So, and I assume that you also focus on new southbound policy. So my question to you is, what has been the most effective tool or aspect of the new southbound policy in your opinion, and how and what tool could actually be used to strengthen the soft power and regional goodwill for Taiwan? And also how soft power could be used to earn more friends in the region. I know there are a lot of questions, but all of these questions are interlinked. So.
Sure, thank you, Sana, and my warm thanks to TAEF for the invitation to speak today, and of course to all of you who are holding on at the end of the day after this full day of many insightful conversations. And so my name is Caroline Freed, and I am indeed have been based in Taiwan for 8 years now, and am part of the founding team of the Center for Asia-Pacific Resilience and Innovation, or CAPRI. And so I'd actually like to perhaps bring it back to what you mentioned at the very beginning of the panel, which was the people dimension of the new southbound policy, and basically the role of talent in NSP Plus in not only Taiwan's soft power, but in enhancing the resilience of the entire region. And my apologies to Kato-san, I will be using the term Asia-Pacific for most of my remarks, and perhaps we can talk later about and get into the terminology. And so I'd indeed like to discuss the talent dimension of NSP Plus, which I view as the perhaps most important aspect of the policy, because of course all other pillars of policy, whether it's trade and supply chains, security or democratic resilience, sustainability, public health, they depend on partnerships within the countries in Taiwan's neighborhood, and these partnerships are carried out by people working in governments, in the private sector, in academia, in civil society, and of course in think tanks, which I'm very happy to be among so many think tanks from throughout the region and the world today. And so over the nearly 10 years since the southbound policy had started, it's cultivated what I think is perhaps one of Taiwan's strongest aspects of soft power, which is its human and intellectual networks. And so one of these markers of success has been the increase in international students from in Taiwan's higher education institutions. Within the last academic year, Taiwan had 82,000 students from NSP partner countries, which make up 67% of all international students in Taiwan, and this is up from 27% 10 years ago. And of course, this is something I personally look at closely because it's also how I ended up in Taiwan in the first instance. I had the opportunity to come to Taiwan and do a master's degree here, funded by a Fulbright grant. And so going forward, the real strength of the NSP Plus will lie in how it empowers these people who are becoming more connected to Taiwan to co-design a future for the region with innovative policy thinking. And so Taiwan is not only at the center of a sticky geopolitical situation, but it's also at the center of competition between two models of innovation, between perhaps, like was mentioned earlier, the securitized autocratic ideas of how to promote innovation, and then the parts of the world that share democratic values. And so Taiwan cannot weather through this alone, and it needs partnerships with its neighboring countries in the region and the new southbound policy countries specifically, as we all share similar challenges. As was mentioned by Professor Pant in the last panel, And so the challenges that Taiwan and the rest of the region face are becoming more complex, and old ways of doing things won't cut it if Taiwan and its partners are to become more resilient. And so at my organization, at CAPRI, we view resilience at the societal level as the ability to learn, the ability to adapt and collaborate under long-term stresses as well as in response to sudden shocks. And so complementary to that idea of resilience is innovation, basically the idea to come up with new ways to address these challenges. And so a little bit of the CAPRI lore, as it were, is that we were founded during the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2022, and with a mission to enhance global resilience and promote innovative policy by drawing on the experiences of the Asia-Pacific region. And our research explores how challenges across public health, economic dynamism, environmental sustainability, and technological transformation are addressed across countries. And so in response to this increasing uncertainty, global competition, and fragmentation, Taiwan and its partners in the region should be leaders in the next era of problem solving. So as an example, a couple months ago, CAPRI hosted a expert from our partner institution, Brookings Institution in the United States, Maria Solis, as well as Christy Xu, who is a senior fellow both at CAPRI and at TAEF. And so we had a discussion here in Taipei about how the new round of tariffs are affecting Japan, affecting Taiwan, and the other Asia-Pacific partners. And so Christy Xu pointed out that the strategy of simply moving supply chains out of China and into partner economies, like the new southbound policy economies, now will perhaps not work as well because all economies in the region are being hit by the tariffs. And so new approaches are needed for Taiwan and its partners to navigate this new world. And so these new approaches and new ideas will only be supplied by forward-thinking talent. And so actually just 5 days ago, CAPRI hosted its inaugural leadership forum with the global head of HR at TSMC and the president of Arizona State University, Dr. Michael Crow. And so naturally, they discussed the challenges and the opportunities for the US and Taiwan to develop partnerships in chip making and in developing the semiconductor sector in the US. But throughout the conversation, whether it was about training new engineers, encouraging women to enter the semiconductor industry, or finding ways to make the industry itself more environmentally sustainable, it always came back to the investment in human talent that can solve problems. So when thinking about the challenges, the changes in the world, that Taiwan and its partners are facing, the main challenge in this next phase of NSP Plus is how to leverage the connections that have been built up over the last 10 years and create cross-border problem-solving communities in the region. So in short, NSP Plus should be focused on building a regional ecosystem for innovative ideas to flow. And so this is where CAPRI aims to create impact by partnering with think tanks and with experts worldwide on research that addresses our changing world. So whether it's the next pandemic, the energy transition, supply chain reconfiguration, or population aging and decline, these challenges are common to countries across the region, and the role of NSP Plus will be to enable talent to come together across sectors and across borders and to work on solutions together. So perhaps in short, the next thing on President Lai's mind as he's thinking of how to define NSP Plus should be how to create an ecosystem in which Taiwan acts as a hub for innovative ideas. And so building this ecosystem is at the heart of our work as an international and non-governmental think tank because talent is not peripheral to the core goals of NSP, but they are at the heart of successful policy in trade and innovation and security. And so it'll depend on integration between the public, the private, and the policy sectors. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And I totally agree with you. And I think this is something that we have to keep saying, that Taiwan should not stand alone. And I think this is something that we are trying to do by talking to each other, by talking to think tanks from different countries. And in fact, since the pandemic, one of the main slogans from Taiwan's side has been, Taiwan is helping, Taiwan can help. So Taiwan has proven itself to be a credible friend. And I don't like to make comparisons between Taiwan and China, but I would go ahead and do it. Taiwan is considered as a friend in the region and beyond, but China is considered as a country that is not benign. China has issues and disputes with you name a country and then you will find a dispute, be it economic coercion, trade dispute, or territorial dispute. So I think there is this distinction that we have to focus on, and specifically this session on friendship and reciprocity is something that perhaps we could bring this point out. I think I really agree with your point about having a collective response, specifically at track 2 level and specifically through think tank diplomacy. Of course, when we talk about Taiwan, there are a number of constraints, there are a number of limitations. China factor comes in the forefront. But then think tanks do not really have issues like those. And the thing that you mentioned that Capri is doing, trying to develop regional ecosystem of ideas and innovation. And I think this is something that we need to discuss. We need to come together. We need to talk about mutual interests. We need to talk about concerns that we all are facing. And I feel that specifically Asian countries, when we sit together, we have similar concerns. It's just that we don't get to talk to each other as much, so there is hardly any collective response. Before we go to the audience, I would like to pose just one question, same question to each of the speaker. Since the session is on friendship and reciprocity, so from your country's perspective, how do you think Taiwan could actually build durable friendships and networks that first could endure political shifts, and how it could perhaps establish itself as an indispensable partner and friend in the region?
Okay, that's a very good question for the Philippines. No, if I would say, I think Taiwan is one of the Philippines' best friend. I did my dissertation on Philippine-Taiwan relations and a one-China policy, an analysis of the relational pattern. So I actually traced the relation. It has been robust no matter whose administration it is, whether it's Marcos, Cory Aquino, all the changes in administration, the economic and the people-to-people relation has always been increasing. It never went down. Even when there was an executive order that does not allow officials, and that was true until my time when I was a deputy cabinet secretary. I'm an alumni of Taiwan, but I cannot come because I was a senior undersecretary. But if I come, I have to make sure that there is no press or no statement at all. So that's one. So in terms of friendship, we've always been very strong in terms of economic and people to people. We've always have students coming here. We have a strong economic council between Taiwan and the Philippines. So, and if it was just people to people, but lately because of the security situation, it changed. Even the chief of our armed forces of the Philippines has openly declared that if anything happens to Taiwan, we cannot be a bystander. Because anything that happens to Taiwan, we have 200,000 people that has to be repatriated. And anything, if there are missiles that are sent to Taiwan, it's gonna definitely affect Northern Philippines. So the president has spoken. In fact, even the security sector is now involved in discussions, as you mentioned, especially in the West Philippine Sea. So it is a very strong resolve that Philippines and Taiwan would continue to have that friendship in a very meaningful and deep way.
Before I pass the mic to you, I want to just say that when the statement was made by the Filipino president, he was actually in India. He was giving an interview to an Indian channel. So the statement about Taiwan, that Philippines will not be a bystander was made in India, and that became an issue in China.
Yes, there was a strong protest from the Embassy of China about the President and the Chief of Staff statement.
Right, thank you. In terms of people-to-people exchange and how we can enhance, well, I think the TAEF has already laid out a clear framework in which to achieve that. I think the framework was like 3 civic corridors. One is on think tanks. The second one was on NGOs, and the third was on the youth. So first, on the think tank space, we need to, of course, definitely have to strengthen regional policy research network. Japan's think tank may not directly shape policy like the US or in other countries, but it is playing a critical role in monitoring and evaluating and intellectually informing the public debates. So enhancing those kind of linkages to support evidence-based trust building be one avenue to further this kind of a collaboration. For the second, on NGO, since I stand on a slightly different position from think tank, because as I said in the beginning, of course we do a lot of thinkings, but the emphasis on our organization as a foundation is more on implementation, how we can implement the ideas, how we can bridge the recommendation to the implementation. So that is the way in which we think how things should be done in this area. And of course, as a foundation, the resource that we can provide is funding, but not only the funding, but there's other resources that can contribute, like linking the people together, bringing multi-stakeholders into the discussion, and also, again, to bring this, to materialize the ideas into implementation. And what I see lacking in this space is, of course, think tanks have networks already. Existing networks are here in this region. But what we see lacking is more broader in terms of the networks among philanthropic organizations. So, and thankfully, Dr. Allen has mentioned our initiative as an Nippon Foundation to try to promote and enhance the collaboration and, of course, network and collaboration amongst the broader philanthropic organization is that we have established a different platform to bring different philanthropic organizations, including foundation, to come together, first to build trust, and then to come with the implementation. Trust be the base of any cooperation, and this kind of platform be very much important to initially build trust to ensure the implementation at the later stage. So that this will be the second point that I just want to mention. And third is on the youth. Again, this is about the talent building, capacity, human resource development for the future. And even amongst TAEF and the Nippon Foundation and other like-minded foundations, there are, of course, many platforms that youth can come together to discuss about the future and what are the challenges that we're facing in the region, and also what the youth can do to contribute in the issues that we face today. And there are existing platforms. We should have given more opportunity to the youth to expose to the issues that we are facing, and also the intergenerational dialogue be also important. So we should not only focus on youth, but also to provide an opportunity to give the youth more opportunity and expose to the new ideas or existing ideas that is there on the ground. So I will end here.
Thank you for your question. Yeah, friendship, of course, matters. But maybe I'm not answering question, but my point is, I believe Japan, Taiwan, we have long time friendship. And of course, friendship is stronger the better, the deeper the better. But my point is we need to go beyond friendship. And my point is Japan, Taiwan should be responsible for this regional peace and stability. We we have a responsibility to share our insight value with other partners jointly, Japan, Taiwan. Not only Japan, Taiwan, not only bilateral, but multilateral, partnership in this Indo-Pacific region. I think this is quite important because I think to some extent, Japan, Taiwan, we are sharing destiny. We are sharing destiny. Both Japan and Taiwan, we need to survive in between major power politics, US and China. US-China conflict, the Taiwan crisis, how to understand China's economy. And again, I think Japan, Taiwan, we are facing the uncertain expansion of China. But the problem is how to understand China. What is Xi Jinping's strategic intention? I think Japan and Taiwan, we can discuss more and deepen our understanding and share our understandings with other partners in this region. So Japan and Taiwan, we need to go beyond friendship. Not saying, oh, we are friends. It is good, of course, but we need to go beyond. This is the first point. And in this sense, I think what I mentioned previously, regionalism matters. It should be open. And multilateralism matters. And inclusiveness, finally. Inclusiveness. Because when it comes to CPTPP, now, unfortunately, I hope US could be back, but let's face the reality. And now I have just checked a couple of countries are applying for CPTPP, including China, of course, Taiwan, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Uruguay, and Ukraine. Interesting. CPTPP, Trans-Pacific, and actually the United Kingdom already in. So, and UK has its own Indo-Pacific strategy, and Australia as well. So, now the concept, or what is Indo-Pacific? So where is the limitation? Maybe no limit, maybe, but we need to define carefully. So how far should we go, and how should this region look like? So maybe Japan, Taiwan, we need to discuss deeply and frankly. And this is, I think, the responsibility of friendship. Thank you. Yeah.
Need to go beyond friendship, but how do we strengthen this friendship and go beyond friendship and do more? And what exactly should we do that?
I think this is a kind of reciprocity. If we do work, continue to discuss, continue to share, and as a result, I believe our friendship should be deepened. It's interactive, interconnected. So this is a process, not outcome. Yeah, so let's build this process.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's a well-established friendship and interest in Taiwan in the U.S., which is hard to describe unless you sort of see it walking around Capitol Hill or walking around our government services or even the general public. We're really, we have a very long and complicated shared history, and I think that's the base. I'll give you, because I had a menu of 4 or 5 items that I think really are important to building on the U.S.-Taiwan relationship, and that is make it less bilateral and more regional. I wouldn't say global yet, not to say that it's not important for U.S. and Taiwan to think about Europe or elsewhere, but I just think in this Indo-Pacific region, given the changes, given American equities here, and given Taiwan's growing equities here, we heard it on students from the region in Taiwan. We heard about Taiwan investments and trade in the region and relationships. I think take the U.S.-Taiwan bilateral relationship and make it much more regionalized. Now, there's a very popular term these days in the energy field, in the nuclear field where I used to work, on small modular reactors. I call these small modular relationships. And U.S. and Taiwan should build small modular relationships. Sure, we can cover the region. Sure, we can engage in lots of places. But I would categorize Japan. I would categorize Philippines. I would categorize Vietnam. I would categorize 3 or 4 other countries in the region that should receive top billing for directed, targeted U.S.-Taiwan cooperation. And we can be the core of it, but we shouldn't be the end of it. And we can develop a network that starts from these small modular relationships. Third, I think we should focus on subnational elements. Taiwan's equities are far above its weight, 8th largest US trade partner despite not being the 8th largest economy in the world. But Taiwan punches way above its weight. And because it does so, it has both the wherewithal, but also the size limitations to matter a lot for subnational units. And that could mean picking select provinces or states in India or elsewhere to really work on this. And I've looked at some of the laydown of Taiwan companies and Taiwan exposure in Indo-Pacific, and there are places where Taiwan is particularly important at the subnational level. So I think that's a third area that could be area. And the final area I would say is that, two final areas. I have discussed this with Chairman Shah before, that so much work, extraordinary work has been done by the Taiwan-Asia Exchange Foundation. But as I said, I'm just reflecting my recent travels. It has yet to reach the popular imagination in Southeast Asia. And I'm looking at ways in which Taiwan is more accessible to the general public, and the knowledge about Taiwan and its role in the Indo-Pacific is more accessible to the general public. What does that look like? I'm not exactly sure. It's probably a combination of products and services and cultural outreach, but it would include. And the final thing I want to say, I know the Quads may or may not happen. I understand all of that. But right now, the U.S. is focused on what I call sort of very energy-producing multilaterals, sometimes called mini-laterals. They are the U.S.-Japan ROK relationship, the Quad relationship, and the U.S.-Philippine-Japan relationship as well. And I think these also align with these small modular relationships that can be built. And I think we have to think about ways to slowly introduce Taiwan into these relationships. And I think there's an opportunity there. It's not going to start with G to G. It's not going to start with Taiwan being welcome to the Quad Plus. That's not where it's going to start. But we can start pushing the ideas about how Taiwan plays an element in particular areas of Quad, or dare I say, AUKUS, given Taiwan's technological support. These are very delicate issues. So they can be in the R&D space, they can be in the innovation space, they can be in the technology space, they can be in the technology training. The other day I was looking at the Quad fellowships for S&T, for STEM, S&T. And I thought, there's no reason Taiwan can't be in this. This isn't government to government. This is educational. This is innovation. It could start with just bringing Taiwan into a docking station, into how does it manage its technology? How does it manage its energy? So there are ways to do this subtly, targeted, small scale, but deliberately.
Thank you, and perhaps I'll attempt to answer what Satu just mentioned about building awareness among the general public about Taiwan and the basically the great stuff coming out of this island. And I think of that in terms of how can we promote cross-border research that highlights issues and challenges where Taiwan is actually a leader. And so this was a big part, actually, of how CAPRI got its momentum at its founding during the COVID-19 pandemic. There was recognition that Taiwan did an excellent job in protecting public health and also maintaining its economic resilience throughout the pandemic, of course, because it maintained public health, especially before the COVID-19 vaccines were available, widespread available. And so that gave us the chance to to fill gaps in understanding, especially through cross-border research, and by bringing together stakeholders that don't necessarily encounter each other on a day-to-day basis. So that includes from the private sector, from the think tank sector, academics who work in very different fields. And so that's, I think, quickly becoming a signature of our work at CAPRI. And so moving from that, I think for Taiwan to show itself as a friend in the region and a partner is to, like I mentioned before, create an ecosystem where those exchanges can happen. And also where Taiwan can learn from other countries in this region. One of our largest projects so far has been on the sustainability and resilience of health systems, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, Taiwan's health system has achieved a lot, and it's facing a lot of structural challenges that are common to many of the other countries in this region. And so looking ahead to CAPRI is hoping that this ecosystem of the private sector actors, government sector actors, think tanks, researchers, and academic experts and civil society can come together on some of the most challenging problems in the region. And over the next couple of years, we're embarking on a project that will look at both the climate resilience of this region as well as economic resilience of this region, and how climate goals, especially with energy policy, economic goals, especially regarding technological innovation. Of course, we know Taiwan's aiming to be an AI island within the next few years, and how do you balance that with growing energy demand, growing demand for green energy, and how it's all tied up in the region's collective goals to become a more resilient region and more sustainable for the next several decades. So I think I'll stop there.
Thank you. You all have given us a lot of food for thought and a lot of recommendations to include in Taiwan's potential Indo-Pacific policy. We just have enough time for one round of questions. So if you have any questions. No questions. So thank you so much, and let me thank my panelists, and I think it was a very insightful session. Thank you so much.